So I've been thinking quite a bit about the patch notes and the current state of PvP these last few days, and while to be honest, a lot of these changes don't really hurt my builds or my playstyle that much. In fact, we're actually getting a little bit buffed in this patch with the rapier changes. I feel one, this patch is honestly a little bit confusing, and it's been a little bit difficult to try and figure out how to make a video that was a little bit different than what a lot of people were already saying. Because to be honest, I pretty much share a lot of the same opinions that a lot of you are having. When you have a MMO that doesn't have a class system and your expression and build customization comes from your weapon choices and what combinations you choose, is that much more important that the weapons have a strong identity. And before these patch notes go live, like talking about where live is currently, I felt like they had a pretty good balance between all the weapons already. Usually what you would want to do is buff the underperforming things to bring them in line with what you believe is overperforming, and they did do that with the patch by buffing rapier, spear, musket, hammer. Like, they did a good job of bringing up some of the underperforming things in the game. But in the same token, they went and pretty much demolished Firestaff and Ice Gauntlet, which I really don't understand. I felt like they could have taken a much more subtle approach to both of these weapons and maybe taken one or two of these buffs at a time instead of completely chopping the entire lineup of the weapons, because you're now just making them switch places with the other things that were underperforming. And on top of that, in live as it is currently, I felt like mages and great axe and hammer players were pretty even when it came to having equally skilled players like go at it in like a 1v1. It was essentially a 50-50, and it came down to more of a skill-based situation than what weapons they chose, because I felt like the balance was pretty good. But with these changes and the fact that they have buffed hammer and not touched great axe at all, it's going to essentially just make the game a entire melee meta, which I don't understand. But yeah, like I said, I do share most of the opinions that people are having about the weapon changes. But the thing that I really wanted to talk about today was actually something that I feel needs a lot more attention than it's getting right now, and that is the different armor types. I feel like the different armor weights are having a bigger impact on PvP than people really think that it is. Currently, as it stands, as I mentioned, a lot of these changes aren't really affecting me as much or my playstyle. But when you try to put yourself in the shoes of anybody else, whether that be a heavy armor player fighting a light armor player, it generally feels like a wild goose chase, to be honest, because when you end up facing a really good player in light armor that's paired with a weapon that has mobility, you can honestly end up iframing and evading and dodging forever, it seems like. And then when it comes to a light armor player fighting a heavy armor player, generally, for the most part, I feel like we deal very little damage. And because of how drastic the damage reduction is, where heavy armor can reduce a ton and light armor feels like paper, the bonuses for the armors end up pretty much not really being felt. Light armor is supposed to deal more damage and heal more. Heavy armor is supposed to CC for longer and deal less. But because of how weak light armor is, heavy armor builds can deal as much damage as a light armor build. And on top of that, the actual bonuses that the armor types get, I feel, aren't really interactive, and they could have a lot more they could have a lot better or more engaging bonuses for the armor types, I feel. And I try and not just point out problems without giving solutions. So some of the ideas that I felt could be implemented for the armor types that would, one, balance the game a little bit more and just make the armor types feel a little bit more engaging and fun to use, is playing into how they already play, but just tweaking the bonuses to make them more gameplay oriented than stat based. So for example, with light armor is a mobility based armor, and it feels like currently the damage that you deal and the bonus healing you're supposed to get is not felt. So one of the bonuses I feel like they could add to light armor is making the dodges more engaging. So as I mentioned, it does feel very, very weak right now in terms of damage reduction. So an idea I had was you could give light armor a bonus to where if you're actually able to successfully iframe an ability using your dodge, like your roll, then maybe give a slight bonus to the next hit that you'll take. Bonus reduction, for example. So if I dodge an attack, give me fortify on the next hit that I take. Just make it a little bit more engaging so that it's not just a pure stat based thing. For heavy armor, it's based around damage reduction and CCs. So instead of it just being CCs last for 20% longer, an idea I had would be you could give them bonus damage on the next attack if you successfully land a CC, or bonus duration on your next CC if I successfully land one. For example, hammers are based around stun locking people. So if I land a hammer stun, give me a bonus duration onto the next stun if I land on my hammer. Something like that. And then medium armor, I feel, is in a pretty weird spot because I can essentially deal as much damage to a medium armor build that I do to a light armor build, but they don't do as much damage as light armor, and they don't CC for as long as heavy armor. So I felt like they could honestly just change around the passives for medium armor altogether. It's based around medium distance hops, so I felt like they could make this more of like a skirmisher type armor. So maybe give them a bonus to your next light attack or ability after a hop or two. So make it more engaging to where you're not just spamming all your dodges to avoid damage, to where you're actually trying to time your dodge to chain damage in between your attacks. So something like Spear, for example, hopping into a stun, hopping into a damage ability, hopping into another stun. It would just make the armor, I feel, a lot more fun to use. But overall, I feel they need to give a lot more love to the armor types. And yes, 100%, the patch notes also are pretty insane. If they do go through with them, I definitely feel like mages are in a very, very bad spot. And it's essentially going to become a melee meta. As I mentioned, I'm sorry I didn't go deeper into the actual patch notes because, as I mentioned, a lot of people have already given their thoughts on how they feel, and I share those opinions. And as I mentioned, they don't really affect my playstyle in particular. So if you were wondering maybe some more thoughts on the mage changes, you could definitely check out some mage players, because I've been looking at people myself and I've seen a lot of good content creators give their thoughts on the fire staff and gauntlet changes. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on this topic. Hopefully they maybe take a second pass at these changes before they push it to live. But yeah, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day.